You know, we're in the middle of John, and what's going on here? Well, hey, there it is. Sorry about that. I just had to see it. Oh, now it's gone. Oh well, now it's back. Okay, but I'm looking here because I wanted to do it, and I didn't see it. The Gospel of John is a very interesting book. Now, part of the problem I have is that sometimes I read the Gospels and I read them very much too technically. I want to say, what's going on here? Why are they having this conversation? Who wrote it? What's all in the background? That's kind of my particular disease. But the Gospel of John is all about one-on-one encounters throughout this whole Gospel. They're very personal, very intimate. And so it is with this story. In many ways, John chapter 8 is the climax, the high point of the Gospel of John. Some of these intimate conversations are Nicodemus, the woman at the well. There's a paralyzed man. There's the woman caught in adultery that opens up chapter 8. And today we have Jesus interacting with this very small group of, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this passage. This small group of people who I think are starting to follow him or interested in following him. So I'm reading out of 8, starting with verse 31. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? And Jesus replied, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know you're Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me because you have no room for my word. But I'm telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father. Abraham is our father, they answered. But if you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the works of your own father. We're not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. There's a lot here. I'm going to try to unpack it a little bit. And I'm going to unpack it in ways that maybe are a little bit different. This is an interesting interaction. So the first thing they wanted to tell Jesus when Jesus talked to them about being able to set them free, the first thing they protested and said, why are you telling us this? We have never been slaves to anyone. Now, here's what we do. This book is so holy to us, we don't see the humor. We don't see the irony. We don't see what's supposed to generate a laugh. And this is one of those passages. We have never been slaves to anyone. This is a Jewish person saying, we've never been slaves to anyone. And I imagine someone saying, really? What's this whole Egypt thing that you talk about every Passover? What's this thing about the plagues and the 400 years? And yet you want to say we've never been slaves to anyone. But let's put that on the shelf just for a second. Then you have this other thing you talk about. You talk about your time in exile in Babylon. I need to hear more about that. That was about that could have been anywhere from about 60 or 70 to 100 or so years you were in Babylon. That sounds strange. Then, not too far before this, maybe 170, 180 years, there was this group called the Seleucids, the leftovers of the Greeks, who had taken over Jerusalem. and had done so in a way that enraged the Jews so much, they actually tried to fight a war against them. By the way, in a couple weeks, back at Christmas time, that was also Hanukkah. So you have all these celebrations. You want to talk about Passover, you want to talk about Hanukkah, you want to talk about exile. Now you're looking at me saying that you've never been slaves to anyone. That doesn't make any sense. Especially, and in my mind, I'm not saying this is how it happened. In my mind, I almost have this conversation going on in the street in front of a Roman soldier, standing at the entrance to something, and him hearing these Jews saying, we've never been slaves to anyone, and the Roman soldier thinking, wow, what's wrong with these people? And Jesus even takes it in a new direction. He says, you're a slave now and you don't even know it. Anyone whose life is so wrapped up by sin puts you in slavery. We know this. We know people. I know you probably know someone in your family, someone that's a close friend who can't get out from under alcohol or gambling. And by the way, am I thankful that my life is not wrapped up in gambling, because 3 of my final 4 have already been eliminated. I would already be a mess. Me picking you in the final 4 was the kiss of death this year. Kansas, gone. Arizona, who was in my final 2, gone. And I didn't even have Purdue. I knew that was going to happen. People who drugs or serial relationships or power or money or a host of things. And Jesus is looking at them saying, you're slaves in ways today that you can't even possibly know. And I'm telling you that there can be freedom on the other end of this. This sounds familiar to us because we know, I think, that left to our own natural devices, we quickly descend into slavery of one sort or another. We live in a time right now in 2023 where a lot of prominent voices tell you the way to truly be free is if you surrender to that which is naturally within you. And if once that gets out and you let what's naturally within you out, then you will truly find freedom. Except most of us have very, very distinctly destructive tendencies. Not all the same, but we do. Now, there's something that goes on when a Jew in the first century starts talking about who's in the family, who's not in the family, who's a slave, who's not a slave. You're going to have to trust me on this one. They're all starting to talk about the Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael story. And they're doing that right here. Because right away, they start talking about who's really in the family. In our family, there's a couple distinctive qualities. There's a whole line. My mom's maiden name was McWhorter. M-c-W-H-E-R-T-E-R. The McWhorter men, from my brother on up to my grandfather, to uncles, to cousins. If you see a really thin man with very big ears coming at you, chances are that's my family. And you kind of know who's part of the McWhorters because it really is big, wide ears and very, very... My brother, some of you remember when he was here, my brother is now 55, and he weighs, in a 3-piece suit, having jumped in a pool, still wet, he weighs 135 pounds. Jesus starts talking about family, who is in and who is out, who is a part and who's not a part, and he's in this discussion, and they want to talk about who really is one of Abraham's descendants. And these people who are kind of attracted that Jesus is in this conversation with, saying, wait a minute, why are you talking to us about family? We are in. Look at our family history. Look at the temple right there. Not that one, that's Babylon. We are in Israel. This is my family's legacy and land. The temple is here. And by the way, if you have any doubt of my status, look at how well I follow all the rules. And if you think they don't think that way, in Philippians chapter 3, when Paul has been challenged, he said, if you think you have confidence, I have even more. I'm the tribe of Benjamin. I was circumcised on the 8th day. I'm a Jew's Jew. As for my legalistic following, I was faultless. They're talking very much in the same way. Do you have any idea how long my family has been a part of this? We haven't had pork in hundreds of years. We haven't even been to Red Lobster. We don't have crab legs. We don't have lobster. And when all of you go, we never have eaten a bacon double cheeseburger. Because that breaks 2 Jewish food laws with 1 sandwich. I always like to bring that one up. I know my family. I know how long we've been here. I can vouch for everybody else in this room. But you, Jesus, I'm not too sure about. Who are you? We do not hear the sting that's inherent in these words. We'll get a little more pointed later. We don't know if we can trust you yet. We don't know if you're the real thing. In fact, at the end, in this conversation, in the end of this challenge, they say this thing. They say, they look at Jesus and say, wait a minute, we aren't illegitimate children. That is an odd thing to go to. And the reason why is I think this was a pointed reference at Jesus. Who are you to lecture us? We aren't illegitimate. We've heard the rumors about your mother. We know all the shady stories about where you come from. Your mom, how did she show up, before she'd been married, and now you're lecturing us? How dare you talk to us about family? Our family doesn't have the stain that your family does. Jesus doesn't rise to the occasion. He doesn't really get angry or attack them back. He says, really? Because that's funny. You're protesting that you're family here, but you don't act like family. Because I know what the family's supposed to act like. We're right back down into this Abraham-Isaac story again. Jesus looks at them and is basically saying, you don't act like Abraham. Remember, this verse, it's an argument about who's really one of Abraham's descendants. Who's really part of the family. See, I know Abraham. And by the way, he's going to say that in a little bit. He's going to say that in 8:58, before Abraham was, I am, which really got him angry. So this is this part of this long discussion on Abraham. Jesus looked at them. I know Abraham. Abraham believed God. We said, Abraham, go to a new land. And you know what he did? He just went and left and trusted God. He followed God to a new place. He followed God to a new land. And then he had this child of promise, Isaac. Now, it was a struggle. We make it easier than it was. And Abraham waited a long time and had fits and starts. But Abraham had a son named Isaac. And there was no reason for him to come along at that place at that time. Abraham had no reason to believe that this Isaac would be a part of his life. And Isaac was the child of promise. And by the way, when Abraham took Isaac up to the mountain to do to Isaac what every other god around them demanded of their firstborn, God said, do not lay a hand on the boy. God intervened and said to Abraham, don't touch the son of promise. And there's a second part of this. Jesus is challenging them. Do you understand that I am the child of promise? And you are trying to come up with a way to kill me. That is not what Abraham did. Abraham is the central part of the Jewish life because he didn't touch Isaac. Isaac is the promised one that you revere because he wasn't touched, and yet you try to kill me. In fact, remember when God told Abraham that through you I would bless the entire world? And they probably nodded their head, and Jesus said, I'm that blessing. I am here, and you are not seeing it at all. I am that promise, and you are ignoring the God that you say you follow. He did not kill the Son, and you're trying to kill me. There is this underlying premise throughout this whole thing that I really want to spend, the best part of the sermon on. The identity of these people he's talking to, it's kind of they're not really they're interested. They're kind of starting to believe, but they have questions. They're not opponents, but they had real issues with Jesus. This whole discussion revolves around this issue. Jesus, what is real? What is authentic? Are you authentic? They question whether Jesus was legitimate. See, he was making unusual claims. And by the way, I would love to tell you that if you follow Jesus today, you're following one that made no unusual claims. But we have two real unusual claims. First, we say Jesus is God, and we say Jesus rose from the dead. Those are two highly unusual claims that really no other philosopher, no other religion makes. You've heard others say the same things. Back then, the first century, trust me, Jesus was not the first person, nor is he the last person to ever arrive on the scene and say, by the way, I'm the Messiah. Follow me. That was pretty routine. There's one coming along down the line every so often. A couple years later, there'd be someone else. A few years before Jesus, there was someone. There was a major rebellion after Jesus. And then in 70 AD, which was not just a generation later, Israel ceased to exist because Rome stepped in. Can I tell you that's still a question today? And it's easy to see why. Is Jesus legitimate? We make the case that he is God, and we make the case that he rose from the dead. And so we have this question about, is Jesus legitimate? Our neighbors ask this question. Our cousins ask this question. Our friends ask this question. And the reason why is they see the same things we do. Do you know how tired I am, and I know we all are, when we turn on the news and we see a well-known or prominent Christian who says one thing and then does something else? I feel that weight. Oh, I don't care if it's a TV guy or a Catholic priest. Anytime someone in a position of leadership fails, I have to bear some of that. Someone comes up to, looks at me, why are you any different? And I feel that. A few years ago, I was starting, I think it was a fall semester. It might have been around 5 years ago, and there was a student that said, sent me an email, can I meet with you before class? Sure, as a young lady. I said, sure. Come up at a certain time, I'll be up there and we can talk. And she came up, and perfectly nice young lady, and she said, I just want to introduce myself. I'm this. I go, hi, I'm Doug Ward and looking forward to class. And she said, I want you to know that I grew up in the mission field. I'm a missionary kid. I go, oh, that's fantastic. You have a unique perspective. I want you to feel free to share it. And then she looked at me and goes, but I want to tell you another thing. Yes, I'm a missionary kid, and I grew up, I forget where she told me she grew up, but I want you to know that I'm an atheist. And I said, thank you for sharing. I look forward to hearing from you. That is fantastic. I like all kinds of viewpoints. Would you please share? That's great. I don't think she was expecting that. And so she said a few things in class, and it was maybe 3 weeks later. She got to class a little early, and I said, hey, how you doing? How's the semester? She goes, fine. I said, oh, by the way, I wanted to share one thing with you. I think it's important. I think it's important to you. It's not important to me. She goes, really? What's that? I said, you're not an atheist. You're an agnostic. So it's important for you to know the difference between the two, because from what you said, you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic. And she goes, well, what's the difference? And I explained it. She goes, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. And so the class goes on, and she happened to be one that was more vocal than the rest. And we get to about 2/3 of the way through the semester one day, and she came in early. And I went, oh, you're early today. She goes, yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. I said, okay, what's the question? She said, can I be an agnostic and still follow Jesus Christ? And I said, yes, that's me some days. And she stopped, and she said, what do you mean by that? I have to ask you what you mean. And I said, you don't think that if I go to a hospital and walk through a pediatric cancer wing, that I don't leave there a little agnostic for a while? If you don't think that when I watch the news and see a drunk driver hit a van and the drunk driver walked away and the family was killed, then I'm not functionally agnostic, at least for a few days or a few weeks after that. And I said, I think we all struggle from time to time. If we have no dark clouds at all, of what use is this thing called faith? And so at the end of class, she goes, I want you to know I'm still struggling, but I am following Jesus. Because I think she ran into something that was real, something that was authentic, something that's a little different. We live in a world where we see people make moral claims and then live differently. And it makes us question. We live in a world where we see people use influence to enrich themselves. People that use... We all live in a world where mysteriously, shockingly, I don't know how, a simple shopkeeper enters Congress and for 20 years, and in Congress gets a nice, modest, whatever it is, $180-something thousand a year salary, something like that. And when they get out of Congress, my goodness, they have $30 million in the bank. Goodness gracious, how did that happen? If you want to know, I'll explain it in the Welcome Center after church. Using influence and responsibility that's meant to go to other people, using it to enrich themselves. We've seen stories, and I know it's not us, of some pastor in some big church telling his church that their faith isn't what it should be because I should have a Rolex on my wrist. When I have a watch, the watch I wear often is the one my grandfather bought me in high school in 1983. Still works, kind of thing. It makes it so easy to doubt everything. And the people there had seen so many messiahs coming down the line. They looked at Jesus and says, wait a minute, what makes you so different? Because when you go, there'll be someone just like you saying the same things 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What makes you different? Jesus says later in chapter 8, he looks at these people and said, I'm not possessed. I honor my Father, yet you continue to dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, But there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. I tell you the truth, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. Jesus is saying, look at my life. If I was really after power, would I be acting like this? I'm not raising any army. I'm not trying to set up any government. In fact, in a few days, I'm going to willingly lay down my life for the benefit of you. And then I'm going to rise again. The reason why I would offer you Jesus as being the one that is legitimate and worthy and real is I'm at the age now, I hate saying this, I'm starting to drift into the elder statesman category of life, that kind of thing, where I can yell at squirrels in my yard. My wife puts up bird feeders and then gets mad when the wrong species of birds goes on her bird feeders. She doesn't want the grackles or the sparrows or she'll go through. She wants only cardinals, and we have a flicker and that comes by. And when I come home and she's in a bad mood, it's because the hawk is in the backyard and there's no birds at all. There might be a pile of feathers in the middle of the yard. Of all the things the philosophies of all the things that compete for our attention, the thing that is most real to me is this life of Jesus Christ. It is unique, it is different, and it is one that does not seek glory, does not seek to amass anything for itself. One that says, I'm not enlisting an army to fight, I am serving, I am giving of myself. In fact, I'm going to lay down my life so that you might live. What is more authentic than that?